Welcome to Speak Easy English. Today's story is about loneliness, care, change, and the power of empathy. In a small town school, there was a boy named Kabir who sat at the very back of the classroom. He was 10 years old, and he was known throughout the school as the worst student of all. He never did his homework. He never answered questions. He often came to school with dirty clothes and an angry face. Sometimes he fell asleep at his desk. Sometimes he started fights with the other children. The teachers had given up on him completely. That boy is a lost cause, they said. He is lazy and rude. He will never amount to anything. The other children avoided Kabir, and the teachers scolded him every day. With each passing month, Kabir grew angrier and more alone. He sat at the back of the class like a small island, cut off from everyone. No one liked him, and so he had decided that he did not like anyone either. His heart had become a hard, locked door, and no one had ever bothered to ask what was hidden behind it. Then, one year, a new teacher came to the school. Her name was Mrs. Sharma. She was a kind woman with patient eyes, and she was given Kabir's class to teach. On her very first day, the other teachers warned her about him. "Watch out for the boy at the back," they said. "His name is Kabir. He is hopeless. Do not waste your energy on him. He only causes trouble." Mrs. Sharma listened politely, but she did not believe in the idea of a hopeless child. On her first day, she looked at the angry boy sitting alone at the back of the class, and instead of seeing a troublemaker, she saw something the others had missed. She saw a child who was hurting. She decided that before she judged him, she would try to understand him. At first, Mrs. Sharma did exactly what the other teachers had done because she knew nothing else about him yet. But she paid attention. She noticed that Kabir was not stupid at all. When she told a story to the class, his eyes would light up, even though he pretended not to listen. She noticed that he was always hungry, eating his small lunch as if it were the only food he would get all day. She noticed that his clothes were not just dirty, but old and torn, the clothes of a very poor child. And she noticed that the anger in his eyes looked less like meanness and more like sadness. So Mrs. Sharma did something that no other teacher had ever done. She decided to listen. One afternoon, after the other children had gone home, she asked Kabir to stay for a few minutes. Kabir's body went stiff. He was sure he was about to be scolded again, as always. He sat down with his arms crossed and his face hard, ready to be told how bad he was. But Mrs. Sharma did not scold him. Instead, she sat down beside him, not across from him like a judge, but beside him like a friend. She offered him a biscuit from her own bag. And then she said, softly, "Kabir, I am not angry with you. I just want to know how you are. How are things at home? You can tell me anything. I am here to listen." Kabir was so surprised that he did not know what to say. No adult had ever asked him how he was. No one had ever offered to listen. For a long moment, he stayed silent, his walls still up. But Mrs. Sharma did not rush him. She just waited, with kindness in her eyes. And slowly, for the first time, the locked door of Kabir's heart began to open. In a small, trembling voice, Kabir began to tell her the truth. He told her that his father had died 2 years ago. He told her that his mother was very sick and could not work much, so they were very poor and often had no food. He told her that he had to wake up at 4 o'clock every morning to do work before school, carrying loads at the market to earn a few coins, which was why he was so tired and fell asleep at his desk. He told her that he had no time and no light to do his homework, because at night he had to care for his sick mother. And he told her, with tears in his eyes, that everyone thought he was bad, and that after a while, he had started to believe it himself. Mrs. Sharma listened to every word, and her heart broke for the boy. She understood now that Kabir was not lazy or rude at all. He was a child carrying a mountain of troubles that no child should ever have to carry, and not one single person had ever stopped to ask him why. They had only seen his behavior, and they had judged him. No one had cared enough to see the suffering underneath. "Kabir," she said gently, putting her hand on his shoulder, "thank you for trusting me with this. You are not a bad boy. You are one of the bravest children I have ever met. You are carrying burdens that would be heavy even for a grown man, and you have been carrying them all alone. But you are not alone anymore. From now on, we will face this together." And so Mrs. Sharma began to help Kabir, quietly and with great care, so that he would not feel ashamed. She brought a little extra food each day and shared it with him, saying she had made too much. She let him stay in the classroom during the lunch break, where it was quiet, so he could do his homework with her help. She gave him a small lamp so that he could study at home. She spoke to a doctor she knew, who agreed to help Kabir's sick mother. And most importantly, every single day, she made time to ask him how he was, and to truly listen to his answer. Slowly, a miracle began to unfold. With someone finally believing in him, Kabir began to change. The anger faded from his face. He began to smile. And once his burdens were a little lighter, his true self began to shine through. It turned out that Kabir was not the worst student in the school at all. He was, in fact, one of the cleverest. With Mrs. Sharma's help and his own hard work, his marks rose higher and higher. The boy who had sat alone at the back of the class began to raise his hand, to answer questions, and to make friends. There was one day in particular that Mrs. Sharma would never forget. Kabir had not come to school for 3 days, and she grew worried. So after her classes ended, she walked to the poor part of the village to find him. She found Kabir sitting outside his tiny hut, his face pale and his eyes red from crying. Inside, his mother lay very ill, too weak even to speak. There was no food in the house and no money for medicine. Kabir had stayed home to care for her, terrified that he was about to lose the only family he had left in the world. Mrs. Sharma did not hesitate. She brought food for them that very evening. She used her own small savings to buy the medicine that Kabir's mother needed, and she fetched the doctor she knew. For several days, she helped care for the sick woman until, slowly, she began to recover. Kabir watched all of this with wide, astonished eyes. He had spent so long believing that the world was cruel and that no one cared for boys like him. And now here was a teacher who owed him nothing, giving her own time and money to save his mother's life. Something deep inside the boy healed in those days. For the first time, he truly believed that he mattered to someone. When Kabir returned to school, he threw himself into his studies with all his heart, determined to repay Mrs. Sharma's faith in him. And one day soon after came a moment the whole class would remember. Mrs. Sharma asked a very difficult question, one that none of the clever students at the front could answer. The room fell silent. And then, from the very back of the class, a small hand rose into the air. It was Kabir. The other children turned and stared, for the boy at the back had never once raised his hand before. Some began to snigger, expecting him to fail. But Mrs. Sharma smiled warmly and said, "Yes, Kabir. Tell us what you think." And in a clear, steady voice, Kabir gave the answer, and it was perfectly correct. The whole class gasped, and the teacher's eyes shone with pride. From that moment on, no one ever again thought of Kabir as the hopeless boy at the back. He had found his voice, and he had found his worth. At the end of that school year, Kabir did something that brought tears to Mrs. Sharma's eyes. He could not afford to buy a gift, so he made one with his own hands. He drew a careful picture of a small boy sitting alone at the back of a classroom, and beside him, a teacher holding out her hand. Underneath, in his neatest handwriting, he had written, "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. You did not just teach me lessons. You taught me that I matter." Mrs. Sharma kept that simple drawing on her desk for the rest of her teaching life. Whenever she felt tired or discouraged, she would look at it and remember why she had become a teacher in the first place. For she knew, better than anyone, that her greatest work was not in the marks her students earned, but in the hope she helped them find. And of all the children she ever taught, none made her prouder than the boy who had once been called a lost cause. The other teachers were astonished. "What did you do to that boy?" they asked Mrs. Sharma in amazement. "He is completely changed. He is one of the best students now." "What is your secret?" Mrs. Sharma smiled. "I did not do anything special," she said. "I did not have any secret method. The only thing I did was listen. Everyone else looked at Kabir and saw a bad child. They saw his behavior and they judged it. But behavior is only the surface. Underneath every difficult child, there is almost always a reason, a pain, a story that no one is bothered to hear. All I did was take the time to ask him why, and then to truly listen to his answer. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can give a person is not advice, or money, or even food. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can give is simply to listen, and to let them know that they have been heard, and that they are not alone. Kabir grew up, and he never forgot the teacher who had listened to him when no one else would. He studied hard, and with the chance that Mrs. Sharma's kindness had given him, he rose far in life. And when he was grown, Kabir chose to become a teacher himself. He went to work in the poorest schools, with the most difficult and forgotten children, the ones that everyone else had given up on. And to each of them, he gave the same gift that had once saved him. He sat beside them, and he asked them how they were, and he listened with all his heart. And that is the story of the teacher who listened. A story that reminds us that behind every angry face there may be a hidden sorrow, that we should seek to understand before we judge, and that the simple act of truly listening to another person, with patience and with love, has the power to change a life forever,